But I am going to read this because I'm not going to get through it otherwise, I don't think. Well, I've been given by Hassam and Robert, I've been given this strange title of the right density. And certainly an increased density, particularly for neighbourhoods with a predominance of own door housing, is a subject that has held our attention as a studio in recent years. We've published various papers on this and collaborated with others on publications such as Distinctively Local, down on the left, which examine the theme of living well locally with a sensitivity towards context and identity. And all these documents, you can either, we've got some here, you can take them away, or they're accessible on our website. But of course, there is no definitive answer to what is the right density, as it's all dependent on location, a response to context, the anticipated demographic mix, the immediacy of existing public transport, we've heard it all this morning, or the potential for new, achievable, sustainable transport networks, the proximity of existing community infrastructure, etc., etc. And then there is the question, are we talking about the right urban density, as here at the master plan for the Carpenters Estate in Newham, which is a mixed-use residential neighbourhood of apartments, family homes, both houses and maisonettes, to an average density of just over 200 dwellings per hectare, with specific character areas delivering from about 85 dwellings per hectare around the central neighbourhood green to around 400 dwellings per hectare by Stratford Station in the north. Or is it the centre of Mansfield? This is our competition-winning entry for ideas to bring homes back to the centre of the Midlands market town, reusing existing historic structures and an overlay of new buildings to provide a mix of apartments for general needs and later living and own door housing for young families, and providing a gentle but appropriate density, we believe, of around 87 dwellings per hectare, with 20% of those as family houses, and around a new sequence of public spaces and communal productive gardens? Or is it a more rural density of around 35 dwellings per hectare, like this study for a new neighbourhood within the grounds of an existing country estate at Impney Hall, within walking distance or cycling distance of the Worcestershire town centre of Droitwich? Or is it somewhere in between? This is the scheme actually. Or is it somewhere in between, like Great Knighton, part of the southern fringe expansion to Cambridge, with an average density of around 47 dwellings per hectare? More of this a little bit later. As we've heard from Hassam, Matthew and Esther and others, we should look for solutions that reduce car dependency and make neighbourhoods more walkable and cyclable, and more integrated with existing and new community infrastructure. And for many years, we've been advocates of shared surface neighbourhoods and environments to assist with this. This is Redwood Park in Rotherhithe in Southwark, with a gentle density of about 110 dwellings per hectare. It's certainly the case that we need to use land more sustainably. We need to protect land and landscape to increase biodiversity, provide solutions for sustainable drainage, and to promote general good health and improve well-being. And therefore, intensification of new and retrofit neighbourhoods is undoubtedly the way forward. But in the search for identity and a sense of place, it's important that we balance these new higher densities with an understanding of context. Perhaps we should look to more historic or vernacular forms and the choreography of place, and to look to ways in which we can absorb higher gentle densities in a sensitive and seamless way. This and the previous slide are of Horsted Park in Kent, which looked to the vernacular forms of local farmsteads as a conceptual narrative, and the design of Abode at Great Knighton, which started with a study of the monastic and collegiate court structure of historic central Cambridge, combined with references to the fine-grained burgage plot morphology of Fenland villages. And increase in density clearly helps to provide the framework for an improved social infrastructure, schools, health centres, workplace, gyms, shops and cafes, even community allotments and orchards. But as we all know, higher densities come with other challenges. As numbers of residents increase, we must create more public and communal space for social interaction. And for our health and well-being, of course, more space for quiet retreat and contemplation. Perhaps one area where this is particularly challenging is city and town extensions, an area of study for much of our work, where pressures on the urban historic core requires a rethink of the city or town fringe. As we all know, this is often the area traditionally targeted by the volume house building industry, with conventional cul-de-sac developments of relatively low density, say somewhere around 15 to 25 dwellings per hectare. This is often where we're told the demand for car use is perhaps at its greatest, driving to work, driving to shop, driving to school, or even driving to relax. So in these areas, we are now looking at gentle densities of somewhere between 35 to 75 dwellings per hectare, again dependent on context and dwelling mix. We know that once you break the ceiling target of 40 to 50 dwellings per hectare in edge of town locations, where the demand is for a greater proportion of own door housing, you can no longer rely on the typical typologies of terrace or semi-detached housing with back-to-back gardens, without creating a repetitive monotony of endless streets, of relentless perimeter blocks. Normally they're 40 meters wide, we've all seen them, and grids, what Gordon Cullen referred to as endless, featureless suburbia where homes are homeless. The desire for increased densities has an impact on the way we master plan and configure built form and landscape. We must engage at all scales in order to design spatial frameworks which work. And by this, I mean that to produce a workable neighbourhood spatial plan, we have to have a thorough understanding of the homes that make up a neighbourhood and what goes on inside that home. As I mentioned earlier, it's perhaps not possible to rely on the conventional suburban typologies of back-to-back distances of between 18 and 25 metres, and with a public realm dominated with on-street or on-plot frontage parking. And therefore, neighbourhood master plans must be more cognizant of 21st century living patterns and aspirations and the specifics of the home. Could we have produced this master plan for Dale Mill in Rochdale without an understanding of the extended family structures of the second generation Kashmiri heritage residents who live locally, and what this could eventually mean for future models for intergenerational living? When we used this Laurie Lee quote in presentations even 5 or 6 years ago, it was received with a few sniggers, a romantic idea of some bygone idyll. But with the pressures to achieve biodiversity gains and a healthier lifestyle, our relationship to landscape is becoming more and more important, with greater efficiencies required in the use of precious land and the resources. Perhaps the quote now resonates more. Certainly, we have to think about the built form to landscape interface. It's no longer appropriate to think about neighbourhoods bounded by a defining edge of B&Q back garden fences. Similarly, is it the best use of land to arrange perimeter roads which only serve dwellings on one side and create tarmac roads as a neighbourhood threshold to adjacent landscapes? These are examples from recent projects where we've explored a different kind of edge condition. At Northstone here, this is a particular study of a particular kind of edge house for people that are introverts and people that are extroverts, perhaps. And on a recent project on the eastern fringe of the city of Malmö in Sweden, where we've been looking at the idea of working with an existing landscape. This is a golf course, but we're actually building a series of communities within that with immediate access to landscape, but they're all interconnected. And that's one of those villages. We often talk about removing boundaries in a search for greater freedom of movement and to enhance inter-neighbourhood interconnectivity. But as Hisham Matar in A Month in Siena says, boundaries help to craft and nurture a sense of identity and a sense of belonging. And so threshold spaces and settlement boundaries must work harder. Similarly, a celebration of the threshold between neighbourhood quarters also becomes more and more important. We often talk about character areas, but are these really merely a change in roof tile and brick colour? At the Carpenter's Estate, next to the Olympic Park, our renewal master plan, produced in collaboration with Tibble's Planning and Metropolitan Workshop, responds to residents' requests to make a real piece of London, as opposed to the anonymous scale and expression of some of the recent surrounding developments. Here, both the edge condition, the neighbourhood boundary, and the gentle density of the neighbourhood heart, a community focus, is clearly expressed within the three-dimensional spatial framework. And so we get to the finer grain of the neighbourhood spatial hierarchy: streets, squares, lanes, and mews. Some more of a communal nature than public, some areas for neighbourly interaction, and some more frequented by visitors and those merely passing through. This is our work at Riverside, Sunderland, and designed in conjunction with Faulkner Brown and Mawson Kerr Architects, a proposal for 4 new neighbourhoods which straddle the River Wear. At Vaux, one of the first phases of the Riverside master plan to be developed, there is a clear definition between the sheltered mew spaces, which provide a protected environment for neighbourly engagement and children's doorstop play, and the more public nature of the Wear Gorge Promenade, which defines the neighbourhood edge and interface with the Wear Gorge landscape itself. So that's the sheltered mews there. In all cases, the scale of streets and spaces and the sense of enclosure and protection this affords is important. A three-dimensional master planning as opposed to two-dimensional zoning is crucial in creating an environment for neighbourly interaction. Domestic streets with visually dominant and intrusive car parking do not help to create livable streets we all aspire to. All too often, they are non-places and merely become arteries for getting from A to B. This is one of a series of comparative studies carried out for the volume house builder Glenveagh in Ireland. And what we're trying to do is offer a different way of clustering homes. This is the traditional way. It delivers about 30-odd dwellings per hectare. And so we look to the vernacular precedent. This is called a clachan in Ireland. It's a cluster of homes around a central space. And it just shows the potential of this grouping of a way of not only nurturing a community, but also of increasing density, and provides a better spatial framework for community interaction. This house type study for Glenveagh was later developed for a live site at Tyrrellstown in Fingal, with both communal and neighbourhood clachans becoming a focus for the new community, and where the distance between residential street facades is reduced from 23 metres down to just 9 metres. We'll see some more of this later. The design of thresholds between the public realm and the street or lane and the private realm of the house at higher, more compact densities can be challenging too, particularly in creating a safe yet private home environment where overlooking does not become a problem. These are entrance studies for the Tyrrellstown neighbourhood at Wilkins Brook. So, do you design streets with 3 metre wide landscape buffer zones between pavement or shared surface street and the front door, generating about 15 metres between dwelling facades? Or does this still create a streetscape which is lacking in the intimacy of scale, which we all admire in historic settlements? This is a residential lane in Britain in Somerset, it's about 4 metres wide. Or do we interrogate the dwelling plan to ensure that the spaces at ground level are not compromised by overlooking, with perhaps home working spaces, kitchens or family rooms located with street frontages, mitigating the need for permanently closed blinds or curtains? Our competition entry master plan for the Ridgeway Village parcels within the New Eddington master plan in Northwest Cambridge suggests an animated frontage of home working studies, spaces and consulting rooms. They're the red ones on the drawing on the left. But of course, one sure way of creating an intimacy of streetscape and a truly sheltered domestic street is if possible to remove cars and produce a remote parking solution with parking barns on the neighbourhood edge. We first explored this idea with Ralph Erskine at the Greenwich Millennium Village over 20 years ago, but have recently reintroduced the idea for work at Trent Basin in Nottingham, a mixed neighbourhood with a predominance of family homes and maisonettes with a gentle density of about 53 dwellings per hectare, and at Riverside, Sunderland, where strategically located multi-level parking structures provide parking for residents, business space and new medical facilities. In addition, provide energy centres, battery stores and the mobility and home delivery hubs that we've heard about earlier. And finally, to the house types themselves, increased density neighbourhoods often require a different approach to clustering homes, whether this is stacking of own door maisonettes, as at the Vaux neighbourhood in Sunderland, with dwelling types based on locally distinctive precedents, or even the contemporary take on the traditional back-to-back connected homes as at Bode at Great Knighton, where two-bedroom mews houses share cross walls with larger 4-bedroom and 5-bedroom houses. We must challenge the conventions of the 18 to 25 metre back-to-back distance and anticipate the design of homes accordingly. But sometimes a more compact form is required for the dwelling to meet increased density targets. In this case, the courtyard house and townhouses, some with no ground level amenity spaces, as at Great Knighton. Sorry, let me go back to that. And similar types at Wilkinson's Brook. That's the ones at Great Knighton, and then Wilkinson's Brook at Tyrrellstown can help deliver more privacy. These courtyard dwellings deliver a greater range of private and external amenity space for the post-COVID world, an external court garden for children to play, or upper level terraces for summertime home working and relaxing, and the ability to track the sun and daylight at all times of the day. Some of these examples have the added advantage of having dual entrances, which can help to unlock the design conundrum of what to do at the neighbourhood edge, where access to surrounding landscape or streetscape is desirable, but only car access can be provided on an internal street frontage. The courtyard format also provides an opportunity to integrate cars off street in a less intrusive way. In curtilage parking, with an inline arrangement, one car behind another, offers a carrot and stick approach. Either you sacrifice or compromise a little of your ground level amenity space for a second car, or the arrangement discourages residents from making unnecessary short car journeys. So to conclude, we should not look to increase neighbourhood dwelling density and the associated intensity of use without an increase in the quality of private amenity space and an increase in the quantity and quality of community space. This is a current study that we're currently working on this for a community focus for development around 100 new homes on the edge of the South Downs National Park and surrounded by accessible parkland on all edges. So to achieve gentle density neighbourhoods of between 40 and 80 dwellings per hectare with a greater percentage of own door family housing, for us, master planning is a collaborative endeavour which engages in an iterative way at all scales, from the strategic plan to the detail of the home, becoming a three-dimensional exploration of space and form. Thank you.